Hi, I'm Dave Monte with RE/MAX and welcome to my video series, Everything Villages. Today's video is number one in a series on pricing homes in the villages. Today we're going to talk specifically about how important it is to get the pricing right out of the gate when listing your home, but there's a ton of information in here for buyers as well, so stay tuned. So this is video number one in my series of videos on pricing. We are going to be talking about when you list your home, how critical it is to get pricing correct out of the gate. However, if you're a buyer, there is a lot of information even in this video that's going to be important to you. Basically, what happens to seller psychology if their home's on the market for a while. So if you're looking to get a fantastic deal, watch this video. Before we dive deep into this topic, most of this information is in my free 40-page guide, Buying and Selling a Home in the Villages. You can get your copy by emailing me at davemontesales@gmail.com. That email is in the description below this video. So let's get started. Why is it critical to get your home priced correctly out of the gate? Well, 80% of all people who are going to view your listing are going to view it in the first 2 to 3 weeks that home hits the market. Now, why is that the case? Well, think about the last time you bought a home. How do you go about it? What's your initial process? Well, typically you go online, you go to Zillow, you go to Redfin, you go to Realtor.com, RE/MAX.com, or you work through your agent. You put your criteria into these real estate search engines, and anytime a home hits all of those criteria, it ends up in an email in your inbox, and you go look at it. So anytime a new home hits the market, it might be going out to 100 different clients on day one. And the number one criteria that everyone starts with is price range. And if you price your home incorrectly, you're going to miss your target audience. When I do these videos, I rely a lot on experience, but I also do my homework. And when I was doing my homework for this video series, I ran across an article, and I'm reading this article and I'm thinking, this is exactly what I just experienced from the buyer side. And I'll give you the short story, then we're going to step through this example and discuss psychology both on the buyer and seller side on this transaction. But the summary of it is that my client's got a fantastic deal on a home that was originally priced too high. This house just closed 2 weeks ago as I am filming this particular video. So it's fresh in my mind. Anytime I'm assisting one of my buyers in making an offer on a home, the first thing that I do is I will do what's called a comp or a market analysis on the home to determine whether it's priced correctly and give us a strategy on where we're going to make our initial offer and, as importantly, how high the client is willing to go. And while I was doing this analysis, I ran across some things that made me scratch my head a little bit. So let me step through that a little. So when I did my original analysis, I came up with a fair market value of this home of $417,000. I put a high range of $435,000 and a low range of $400,000. Now, in the last video in this series on when I actually build one of these comps, I'll explain how I arrive at the high and low range. There's some geek math that goes into that I like to use, but seems to work out pretty well. So anyway, here's what the house numbers, what I believe they should be. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the multiple listing service amongst other things and look at the price history. Well, I noticed on this one I had a pretty extensive price history. So let's get started. On day one, they had this house listed at $509,000. The second thing that I do before I submit an offer is that I call the listing agent. I want to know what the seller motivation is. Have they already bought a home? Are they looking, do they need to get out of this home quickly? A little bit of negotiating leverage. I also want to know what's important to the seller. Price isn't always the most important. Sometimes it is timing. Sometimes it's how solid the offer is there cash involved, etc. So when I'm reaching out to this agent, I had to ask why she originally listed this house at $490,000. It's $90,000 over fair market value. Maybe I made a mistake. Right? So I wasn't accusing her of anything. I just was curious. And she said, well, my client had happy years. And I use that term myself. And what do happy years means? It means if I'm going to sell a home, I start listening to the prices of what homes are sold for around me. And in the villages, they can vary wildly, even on the same street and the same model for various reasons, which we will discuss in subsequent videos, right? So recently, a home sold for $500,000. But when I was doing my analysis, a majority of the homes were in the low 400s, if not the high 300s. This was the only one that was at $500,000, anyone that was even close to it. So I asked this, he says, well, he had happy years. He wanted to list it at 500 even against my advice. So here's what happens. They list this house for $509,000. Their home is valued at $420,000. Not only do I miss my target audience, but I'm now putting this home, which is worth $417,000, into a search bracket between $500,000 and $550,000. This listing hits people's emails. They're flipping through. The very first thing they do is they go to the pictures. Now they're comparing a $550,000 home to a $420,000 home. And there's a reason why this house for $450,000 is priced the way it is. It's going to be nicer in some way or have some features or a better lot or better view. There's a reason why it's priced that high. And as any buyer, they're going to take a look at side by side, $550,000, $420,000 valued house and say, next. So what I'm assuming is after almost a month on the market, they had no showing, so they lowered their price. The market will always adjust pricing. Sometimes it adjusts it up, sometimes it adjusts it down. If you're in a busy, huge seller's market and you price a little too low, your home's going to look like a fantastic value, and you might have 4 or 5 people bid you up above fair market value. But most of the time, people overprice their homes and it stays on the market too long. So in that first week, or the first month, they probably had very few showings, if any, so they dropped their price. At day 40, they drop it to $480,000. Another few weeks go by and they drop it to $460,000. Another month and a half go by and they drop it to $430,000. Now what happens? Now you're in that price range. If someone's looking for a home that's $420,000, they're going to search between $400,000 and $450,000. This is the first time this home, which should be valued at this, is in that bracket. So you start to see activity. And that's what happened with my buyers. They saw this home, it hit their search engine because they were searching between actually $425,000 and $450,000, and this one was at that $429,000 range. And the house goes pending at 120 days. I have a conversation with my buyers because we're going to determine, number one, what are we going to go in at and how high are we willing to go? They loved this home. This home had some great features. I'm jealous. It backed up to a putting practice green and chipping green. You could step over the little fence in the backyard. I mean, it had a lot of cool things going for it, right? But it was originally priced too high. But my clients were willing to go above fair market value to about $422,000. But where are we going to make the original offer? And I said, well, why don't we go in the lower end of the range? And my client said, yeah, why don't we go in at 405, 410? I said, nah, why don't we go a little bit lower? Why don't we go in at 395? The house has been on the market for a while. That's not going to be insulting. If we meet halfway, we will be at fair market value. So we make the offer at 395. An hour goes by, 2 hours go by. I don't hear from the seller. I said, well, maybe we insulted them. So the phone rings, pick up the phone. I'm talking to the listing agent. I'm bracing myself for, how dare you make such a low offer? And they countered. No, I'm lying. They didn't counter. They accepted the offer at 395. They accepted the offer at 395. So why did this happen? And this is what I read in that article that I alluded to earlier that was this exact scenario, is that this home sat on the market for months. And I'm assuming in those first 2 months, they probably had almost no people looking at the home, let alone any offers. So finally, they have a few people looking at the home, and that first offer comes in, and it's an okay offer, again, low. And instead of negotiating back and risk losing that buyer because that's the only one they've had in months, they accept the offer. And it happens all the time. I'm going to adjust this right now. Anytime a client goes in well above market value, the home sits on the market for a long time for the reasons that we discussed. And oftentimes they end up selling well below fair market value. And that's exactly what happened in this scenario. The market will always correct itself. The market will always take a high valued home, let it sit on the market for a long time, and slowly you'll whittle away at pricing until you get to a fair market value on that home. Having said all this, would I ever list a home over fair market value? And the answer is it depends. I have situations where we were just so far off on price between what I believed was fair market value and what the seller wanted, and the circumstances weren't quite right. And I just said, this isn't right for me. Because as a real estate agent, you invest in listing a home. You pay for advertising. You're going to hold open houses. You're going to spend a lot of time and effort on any listing that you have. And you want to make sure you're spending your time wisely. So sometimes I will walk away if a seller has too high of an expectation what they should sell their home are. Now, where I will list above fair market value is in one of two scenarios. One of them where the seller just knows, they're just trying to get lucky. They know it's going to sit on the market for a while. They're willing to let it sit there for possibly 6 months. They haven't bought another house. And again, they just were taking a stab at a market. Typically, this will happen in a strong seller's market. Now, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on what side of the fence you're on, in the Villages, it's typically a strong seller's market usually. The second scenario that I will list too high is they know that the price is too high and they agree that the price might be high, but they still want to give it a shot. But I have a game plan in place before that happens, meaning I want to take emotion out of it. The last thing I want to have happen is it sit on the market for 4 months and then they take a lowball offer, because that's not fair to my clients. So I will say, we will list at this, but if it goes by for 2 weeks and there are no showings, we know the market is speaking and we are priced too high and we're going to lower it to X. If it's on the market for another couple of weeks, we're going to lower it to Y, depending on the number of showings, etc. I'm not getting into specifics on exactly how this is done because it's different in every scenario. I'm just saying, have a game plan where you take emotion out of the equation so you don't end up starting well above market value and end up selling well below market value. Okay. Well, in summary, it's critical that you get your pricing correct out of the gate, because that's when most people are going to view your listing and you want to make sure it hits your target audience. Now, while I didn't discuss this earlier in the video, it's not my job to come in and say your home is worth X. It's my job to gather all the data, present it to you in a cohesive fashion, talk about the ranges, talk about your unique situation, and determine where we should list your home based on all those factors. If you ever have an agent that comes in and says, here is the price, you probably want a second opinion. The third thing we discussed is that the market will correct pricing. If you're too high, you won't have as many showings and you'll end up lowering your price. And if you're too low, sometimes in the right circumstances in a strong seller's market and that house shows very nice and it's priced a little too low, you might get a little bit of a feeding frenzy with multiple offers and get bid up over list price. So the market will correct prices whether they're high or low under the right circumstances. Lastly, if you find yourself in a situation where your home has been on the market for a long time, have your agent do another comp. Maybe conditions have changed. Solidify in your mind what that price is, what a high range, what a low range is. And you don't want to go lower than that low range based on emotions. If it's priced correctly, it will sell with the right seller. Well, I hope you like this video. I try to keep it as short as possible. If you can imagine, as always, a little housekeeping items. If you did like this video, please hit like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel. That helps this video reach more people so they can get the benefit of this knowledge. And my email address is davemontesales@gmail.com, sales as in selling, davemontesales@gmail.com. Email me for a free copy of one of my real estate calculators, the most popular one being the cost of living in the Villages. I have a comprehensive calculator for that, as well as I have a 40-page guide, buying and selling a home in the Villages, where a lot of this information is in there. And that is also free to you. I hope you have a fantastic day. We'll be seeing you around the Villages. Take care.